Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down here in the catacombs, just reviewing Cardinal Timothy Dolan's response to David Gregory of Meet the Press this past weekend when he was asked about this news story about Michael Sam, who is destined to be the first openly homosexual NFL football player. His Eminence was asked what he thinks of this situation, and his response defies description, so I will simply read it. Cardinal Dolan says of this young man who's come out, quote, "Good for him. I would have no sense of judgment on him. God bless you." I don't think, look, the same Bible that tells us, that teaches us well about the virtues of chastity and the virtue of fidelity and marriage, also tells us not to judge people. So I would say, bravo, end quote. Speechless. We've all been familiar for some time with churchmen who seem incapable of defending the dogmas, doctrine, and liturgy of the Catholic Church. But I guess seeing these same churchmen incapable of standing up for the Church's teaching on morality, basic morality, is something of a surprise and leaves us with really speechless, not knowing really what to say, how to react. How can we sink much further than this? How does this young man, how does he straighten out his life when the Cardinal Archbishop of New York is saying bravo and God bless you for coming out? Now, the third spiritual work of mercy is to admonish the sinner. Has the Catholic Church officially abandoned the spiritual works of mercy? Evidently so. But now, let's look at this a little more deeply. Now I'm talking to liberals, progressives, neo-Catholics, traditionalists, all across the board. Are we satisfied with this answer? Especially liberals. Are you going to let Cardinal Dolan get away with this? Just for a moment, put on hold your positions with respect to the Church's moral teaching. I know you disagree with them. You disagree with it. You think it's hate speech and so forth. It's antiquated medievalism and it needs to go. But just for a moment, put on your little justice cap and say, what would it be like to be a Catholic, like trying to live a faithful Catholic life in the modern church? You have a book of rules. You're supposed to kind of bone up on the rules a little bit, find out what your church teaches, teach your children about what the church teaches, and try as best you can to be faithful to those teachings, right? That's kind of how it is. Whether you're Tom Cruise trying to be a whacked out Scientologist or some Baptist guy or whatever, you find out what the rules are and you try to follow the rules. That's what we're trying to do. We don't hate anyone. We don't hate homosexuals. But this is what our church infallibly teaches about certain sins. That's what's on the books. That's what's in the catechism, that it's a mortal sin, that it's a disorder. So Cardinal Dolan, has the church changed your teachings? Is this what you're saying? So whether we're traditionalists or whether we're liberals, whatever we are, we need to go to Cardinal Dolan and the rest of the episcopate, apparently, and ask them, has the church officially changed her teaching on this? If it has, fine! Let us know! Let us know what we're supposed to believe. We're all for it. We'll try to reconcile ourselves to this brand new approach to moral theology in the Catholic Church. But nobody should let this man get away with this, creating the impression that the church is in favor of civil unions, in favor of coming out, in favor of homosexuality. I don't think that Cardinal Dolan actually believes that, but he doesn't have the guts or whatever it takes to tell David Gregory as much. And so he comes up with this political brouhaha gobbledygook that makes no sense to anyone, that doesn't satisfy traditional Catholics, scandalizes us in fact, and should leave liberals saying, what the heck? He's not reflecting what the Catholic Church teaches, he's just saying what people want to hear, namely, meet the press. That seems to be what he's doing. As traditionalists, we feared that the church would fall to this level. We just didn't actually ever expect it to happen the way it is. But that's what's happening. The moral ground has been ceded. The Catholic Church is ridiculous in her human element, can no longer take a stand or even tell the world what she teaches anymore. And so this poor guy, Michael Sam, the NFL player, is going to feel no compunction to reevaluate his life. When the Cardinal Archbishop, referencing Pope Francis himself in his famous "Who am I to judge" remark, is now campaigning, apparently, for homosexuals to come out of the closet. Great. If that's the new church teaching, let's make it official. But the church can't change her teachings. And Cardinal Dolan knows it. So what we're facing right now is the end of life as we knew it, as Catholics living in America. This whole progressive movement to make the Catholic Church back away from her moral teachings so that she can be more tolerant and tolerable in a secularist democracy is playing itself out to the point where the Catholic Church is beginning to come off as ridiculous to everyone. And that in essence is what traditional Catholicism has always been all about. Defending what the church teaches, even when it's not popular. Now, it's easy to beat up on Cardinal Dolan, and I'm as frustrated with him as anyone else is. But because the church is no longer the moral authority that she once was, we're all getting asked this question by a guy like David Gregory every day. Only there aren't cameras running. And by that I mean, how many of you, how many of us, when we're at the water cooler or at the lunch table, are chiming in with our position on homosexuality and what the church teaches anymore? Very few. We're not allowed to say what the church teaches anymore if we want to keep our jobs, if we want to be promoted, if we want to be accepted. And that's the nightmare that the Church of Vatican II, the spirit of Vatican II, has created for us all. And every time a Cardinal Dolan or some other Christian politician is set in front of a camera now who adheres to the Christian teaching on things like homosexuality, they're being grilled. They're being asked to take an oath, to take a test, whether it's Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann, whoever it is, cardinals of the church. As soon as the cameras roll, what do you say about the church's teaching on the intrinsic evil of homosexual acts? That's the test. And how you answer determines what's going to happen to you in your career, in your future, ultimately with respect to your civil liberties, with your right to move around freely and say what you want. All of us are being asked. This whole thing with homosexuality, especially since the legalization of gay marriage, has become very similar to the oath of succession in 16th century England. The same oath which brought Thomas More and John Fisher to the Tower of London and eventually cost them their heads. Now, when I was young, I used to wonder how in the world did all of those English bishops possibly come to the conclusion that this fat oaf, Henry VIII, was actually the head of the church in England. How did they do that? Were they really convinced by this character? And we thought maybe they were, but now that we're living through a similar period, I don't think they were convinced of it in the least. The reason the Episcopate of England took the oath that Thomas More and John Fisher refused to take was because they were afraid, because they lacked faith. If they actually truly believed that in their martyrdom, in that moment, they would face the particular judgment of our Lord himself, and they would have won the approval of God and would go to eternal beatitude, they would have had the courage, perhaps. But it was a crisis of faith. It was a crisis of courage. And so very few people back then in England had the guts and the faith to take the stand that had to be taken. That, ladies and gentlemen, is where we're heading in the next few months, in the next few years maybe. How long do you think we'll be allowed to sit down here in the catacomb and spew hate speech that is the Catholic Church's teaching on morality? Not much longer. When the internet becomes Christophobic completely and intolerant of all things Catholic, shows like ours will be shut down. Newspapers like ours will be shut down. That's where we're heading. That's what's happening. That's what the spirit of Vatican II has bequeathed to us. What's the answer? The answer is to try to outlive this, as all revolutions do. This one will fall flat on its face ultimately, and there will be a revival. In the meantime, we have to keep the faith. We have to find a way of getting through this. We have to find a way of confirming each other so that maybe, just maybe, a few of us can take the same stand that Thomas More took, that John Fisher took, that Edmund Campion took, that Margaret Clitheroe took. It cost them their lives. To do that, it just seems self-evident that those of us who are trying to adhere to the Church's teaching, which cannot change, despite the impression that Cardinal Dolan may convey to the opposite, we need to stay together. We need to find a way to confirm each other, keep the faith, and stay together. And this is why at the Remnant newspaper, we've been on a virtual warpath lately to try to stop the internecine squabbling among traditional Catholics. This is why I use terms like tradition-minded Catholics down here in the catacombs, because there are an awful lot of people who are Catholic and are trying to find their way. They simply have not discovered the traditional Mass yet, or they're not convinced yet, but they're in this with us, and they're facing the same persecution that we are. And so it becomes obligatory of all of us to try to figure out how we can muddle through. Now here's a rule of thumb. I'll leave this as the parting note. If you go to your favorite blog or your favorite newspaper or your favorite website, and you find that the people running that thing are constantly trying to anathematize other good people, other people who are trying desperately to survive this malaise, this apostasy, folks that are going to Latin Mass, maybe folks that are trying to find conservative Novus Ordo Masses, folks who are homeschooling. If you find people on your favorite blogs and websites trying to make war against those people, that's a problem. We need to stop that. Even if we disagree with a certain segment of Catholics, who we don't know how they can reconcile their canonical status or whatever else might be the bone of contention, keep it to yourself. Pray for them. Pray for yourselves. Pray for your children. Keep the faith. Now is not the time to be warring against fellows who can recite the creed and mean it. And it's absolutely obligatory for all of us to find a way to bring the clans together, to unite the clans, and to sustain, not only for the good of the faith, so it can be handed on through us to generations to come, but for our own security in the days and months ahead. Are they going to round us all up, throw us all into the jails and the prisons, the gulag? Maybe. They might try. But let's make it difficult for them. Let's unite wherever we possibly can and take a stand for the Church's true teachings on morality, on faith, on liturgy, and to try with all of our might and with all of our strength to outlive this period of persecution and tyranny that obviously has visited us. Seems like it's something to shoot for anyway. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.